Welcome to my hideout, guys, and today I would like to show you how to add objects into your footage. We will add object into scene that we're going to shoot, and in second part I will show you guys how to make those objects look as real as possible. You don't need any expensive gear to learn or to do it. A couple of years ago I was doing it with my iPhone. Here you can see just a footage in a park with early version of the quad shot on iPhone 6. Yeah, iPhone 6. But today I will use my second camera. Alright, so now we're going to see what we have. After sorting out your footage, you want to export it as a sequence of PNG files, JPEG files, or TIFF files, which are more high quality and more suitable for further post-production. So let's start Cinema 4D. I'll open the ship that I prepared for this tutorial. Well, I bought it on internet, a low poly model of a ship, and modified it a bit, animated sails, ropes, and added a character in there, which I think is pretty cool. So what I want to do is I want to start referencing my room. As this shot was taken in my room, I know exact dimensions of the objects that I have in there. For instance, this desk, I know it's 155 centimeters long and 70 centimeters wide, approximately. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop a cube in Cinema 4D and specify my dimensions. Here we go. So here I place the cube that represents my table on its place. And now, to track the footage in Cinema 4D, you need to go to Motion Tracker, click on it, and specify where your footage is. And Cinema 4D automatically knows that there were 200 frames in our footage. Once footage is loaded, create background object. This will create a backdrop with your footage on it so that you could see what's happening. Go to 2D Tracking tab and create auto tracks. You can notice straight away that Cinema 4D suggested suitable points for you that it will be able to track. Click Auto Track. The process is going. It's finished, and now let's press play. All good. Before you do any further work, make sure that your scene frame rate is matching your camera's frame rate. This is essential. To do so, click Ctrl D and specify your frame rate. Let's get back to tracking. After 2D tracking is finished, go to Reconstruction tab, and now we can put our lens settings in. We know what lens we used. It was 24mm prime lens, which means it's constant focal length. So it's known and constant. And my camera has super 35mm sensor, so it's 35mm movie. Once you've put everything in, click Run 3D Solver. Solve finished, it says. And now we have a pretty good track. If you would expand Motion Tracker object, you will see solved camera and a list of nulls representing tracked points. Let's pick this point because it's kind of center of our table. I will call it ship reference position. What I will do now is I'll drop my ship into ship reference position, and I will scale it up a bit. I will drop the cube that is representing our table into same ship reference position, and I will click this PSR button, which you probably don't have. To access that command, go to Command Search and type in PSR. Here you go, reset PSR. So I drag that cube, click PSR, and it automatically matches the position. It's quite tiny again, so I will scale it up. Now I will drag that cube around to kind of match our footage table. Something like that. Yeah, perfect match. Now I want to animate my ship, and I don't want it to touch the surface. I want it to float along surface. So here it goes, and this will be our starting point. I'll click on Record Active Objects button. And Cinema 4D records those position, scale and rotation values. Now let's go to the end of this sequence and put our ship in its final position. I'll click record again. I will hit play and here's our ship cruising along our table. To add a bit of more natural feeling to this ship, I will assign a vibrate tag to our ship. I will right click on our ship, Cinema 4D tags, vibrate, enable rotation and set the angles to like 5, 5, 5. The ship is bouncing. Just dial down the frequency to like 0.1. Now we have that kind of wavy movements of the ship. So you see straight away, not a perfect footage, blurred image is solved. Cinema 4D is doing a pretty good job on that. Camera movements are quite precise, but to double check it, we need to render it out and watch it real time. Really important thing here is to remember what lens you used, because then you will have a correct perspective and objects will look natural straight away. Let's render out this little sequence and put it on top of our footage. I'll check my settings, resolution good, frame rate, double check your frame rate. Also in settings guys, both Octane and Cinema 4D, you want to make sure that alpha channels are checked. I'm highlighting those checkboxes here on screen. In renderer, I will choose hardware OpenGL, which will do a quick render for preview purposes. I've speeded up the process in post so that we wouldn't waste time here. Now let's compose it on top of our footage. I usually use Fusion, but it really depends on project. If I would need to work with infographics or something like that, I would use After Effects. Fusion is just more capable of handling more complicated projects. So in Fusion, your favorite shortcut will be Control Space. Type in loader and show Fusion where your footage is. Once loaded, with node selected, click 1 and it will appear in your left preview window. Control space again, loader, and specify where your CG layer is that we just rendered. See that red square next to your CG layer node? Grab it and drag on top of red square on our footage node. Fusion automatically created a merge node. With this node selected, press 2 on your keyboard and it will appear on your right preview window. Press play to play your footage. In real-time playback, it's easier to see imperfections. So Tracker made a couple of little mistakes. This moment here, for instance. See, our ship just jumps a little bit. To get rid of it, we will have to manually clean our track. Let's get back to Cinema 4D. I will expand our motion tracker object and check our solved camera keyframes. To find those tracking errors, I will go to Windows, Timeline F-curve, expand it, and I will find solved camera in this list. So frame 20, you see that big jump. I will click on this dot, which represents a keyframe, and you might want to click this lock time button, and I'll place that keyframe somewhere here. I also noticed those big jumps in other places, so I will clean all that stuff manually. Let's re-render that sequence. Back in Fusion, click Ctrl 8 to select everything, Ctrl P to disable all nodes, Ctrl P to enable all nodes, and everything should be updated now. Looks pretty flawless to me. Okay, before we go any further, let me briefly introduce you into my workflow. In Cinema 4D, I use Octane Render Engine. Octane Render Engine is unbiased, physically correct render engine which utilizes GPU power. And I'm building my machines around that workflow. The best, at least for me, feature of Octane Render Engine is live preview. And what that means is if I will bring up Octane Live Viewer and press render, it gives me a live rendered preview of whole scene. If I will start to rotate my camera, you can see that preview is updated instantly. My apologies guys, I forgot to record it, but I set up the lights same way as I did with the ship and with our table. I dragged lamp, monitor and laptop emitters into the nulls representing those tracked points for those objects in my footage. And I placed them in the positions they should be in. And you can see that my lighting replicates the light that we had in our footage. Another brilliant thing about Octane is physical realism, if I can call it that way, which means you can use your photo and video tricks. For instance, I have a big shelf standing next to my table, and it's white, it reflects light, so I will build it in my scene. I think it's about 30 centimeters wide, and it stands like this. Now I will build walls that also reflect lights. Right wall, front wall, and my left wall. Now light is reflected from my digital shelf and my walls. And it means this reflected light affects the ship. As I already mentioned, this ship was pre-made for this tutorial, so I have all the textures in place. I'll enable them, and it looks quite dark. I'll bring up the intensity of my laptop emitter, and I think ship should be a little bit smaller. Now I will create textures for my walls and my table. Go to materials, Octane diffuse material. In real life, materials are never 100% white, so I will make it gray a little bit. And I will assign it to my walls. You can see that light is not as intense as it was. I will also create an orange wall material. I think ship is still too dark, so I will fake some lights so that it looks something like this. I'm going to create a separate texture for the desk because I can see it was a bit reflective. Materials, Octane glossy material. Materials are never 100% white. I'll make it a little bit gray and assign it to our desk. Desk, table, table desk. Real desk had that reflection a bit blurry, so I will go to materials roughness and set float to 0.1. Now it's blurry but still intense. Managing specular might help. I'll make it dark gray. Good. Next cool thing about Octane is its camera tag. Right click on your camera, see for the Octane tags, and assign Octane camera tag. In this particular case, I don't want autofocus to be active, but I want to pick a focus point. To do so, in Octane Live Viewer, you have a dedicated button called Pick Focus. Click on it, then click on any object in your live viewer to pick a focus point. Now I will deal with aperture and f-stop. To be honest, I never solved that mystery in Octane's settings, and I always just drag those sliders to kind of match my footage depth of field. Now in side-by-side comparison, I think it's pretty much similar to what we had in real life. Another cool feature I like in Octane is its post-processing tab in Octane camera tag. Go to it, enable it, and what it does, it creates those natural kinda glows of emitters. If I'll bring up intensity of bloom power, you can see those lights got brighter. See? Last tab in camera tag I would like to mention is motion blur. Enable it and put 0.025 for shutter. And this in my experience replicates 180 degrees shutter angle in your camera, which gives the most natural motion blur. Now to make motion blur to work, we need to assign object tag to our ship. Right click our ship, see for the Octane tags, Octane object tag. Go to motion blur tab, and there you see drop down menu for object motion blur. You will need transform, but I usually put transform and vertex in. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to talk a bit about compositing. How do I separate shadows from CG desk and put them on our real footage? And here, of course, Octane has its special feature. Go to our ship's object tag, go to object layer and specify layer ID. I will use 7. Now I'll grab all our reference objects representing our real-life objects and group them into one null by pressing Alt-G. I'll call it reference stuff. And I'll assign another object tag to it. And this time in Object Layer tab, I will put number 6 in layer ID. Now the most interesting part. Go to your render settings. In Render, choose Octane Renderer, Render Passes tab, and enable them. Expand Render Layer, enable it as well, and put our ship's layer ID in, which was 7. Look what happens. Octane renders just ship without its environment. Let's check those checkboxes. Black shadows, colored shadows, reflection. And in Live Viewer you see new passes appeared. So now you have all the shadows with transparency. And you can put it on top of your footage. I'll go back to render settings and I'll expand beauty passes. I want to have shadows and I want to have post. Post will render all those interesting glows of the sails in a separate pass. And I can play with it later on compositing stage. What I would like to also have is my light in a separate pass. So I'll go to my reference stuff, select that, let's say lamp, click on my light tag, and in my light settings there is light pass ID on the bottom. I will specify number 2, and then in my settings in lighting passes I will select light pass 2, and it will give me a separate render of that particular light. And I will do that for all other lights as well. And now guys, what I will do is I will send this sequence to do a full render on my main station in studio, because I suspect it might take a while and I would like to save our time. But before that, I'll just double check my settings. So render is finished, and now let's bring all our passes into Fusion. As usual, control space, loader, and specify where your pass is. I will start with shadows. I'll drag it over here, and I would connect it with my original footage. You can see straight away that shadow appeared, and the ship already looks more natural. Now I will bring all our other passes in. This is our lamplight pass. Remember when we put 2 in that lamp settings? In order for this light to show up properly, on your right you have controls. There are different overlay options, but I usually don't use them. Drag this burn in slider all the way to the right, and it will kind of replicate add overlay mode. Cool, now I will bring all our other passes in. The ship looks a bit overexposed. I will go to our main CG pass. I think colors of the ship doesn't really fit our scene. So I'll click Ctrl Space and type in CC, which stands for color corrector. I will go to Shadows tab and I will drag that controller to the teal side of color wheel. Now go to midtones and bring midtones to the orange side of the color wheel. You see, colors now are more in line with our scene. Watch the difference. Okay, so now it's time to sort out our lights. This is ship lights emitter. And you see there is that weird outline. To get rid of it, I'll click Ctrl Space and type in matte controller without any nodes selected. Then I will drag this light pass to matte control. In the menu on the right, I will blur this pass and contract it a bit. And then I will drag this matte control node to the mask input of merge node. And you see we got rid of that weird outline. Watch the difference. I will color correct this light as well by clicking Ctrl Space, CC. I'll make it less saturated. Now I will get rid of monitor's lights for the time being. I'll just disconnect them from our chain. Now I think I want to blur these lights a bit. Control space, blur, and just play with it. I think this is kind of nice. I would like to change the colors of our actual footage. I will create a color corrector to do it. Let's make it brighter. Something like that. Oh, another outline. Let's go back to that matte control and contract it even more. Good. Okay, so I'll just play with lights. As now you've seen the process of how I clean those weird outlines and color correct stuff. Just play with it. And that's what I'm going to do, and I'll just speed it up to save your time, guys. Alright, now it's time to do some artificial imperfections. Any lens adds more or less chromatic aberrations to your footage, so I want this on my CG element. And to do it, I will use Warp Chroma node, but it comes with a paid plugin bundle called Sapphire. I think I connected it to the wrong place. I'll just drag that to my main CG pass by holding Shift. Wrong place again. I applied it to shadows. That's not Rasta effect. It's exaggerated chromatic aberration. So yeah, looks kind of funky, but what we want is to put 0.99 in from Z distance. I always do that and it gives pretty nice effect. Look at that. Watch the difference. See? It kind of displays the image a bit and adds those additional colors, like splitting the channel, like if it would be a lens effect. Now guys, I would like to quickly teach you how to bring your 3D coordinates and camera from Cinema 4D to Fusion. Let's go back to Cinema 4D and open up our scene. I will delete all unnecessary elements from our scene except our ship, our camera, and our walls and desk, our table desk. Now I will go to File, Export FBX. I'll call it to Fusion, and I'll select 7.2 version. Okay, now back to Fusion, File, Import FBX Scene, and select where your FBX scene is. I will leave all settings by default except of resampling rate. I will set it to 25. Here we go. So we have our objects. I don't know which one is which yet. What I want to do is I want to see that scene in Fusion. So I'll click Ctrl Space, type in Render 3D, and I'll drag that 3D merge node to that renderer 3D. I'll drag that node to our preview window, and it's all white. That's because there are no textures or lights in our imported scene, and it all shows up as white. So I'll just start to disconnect nodes to see what is what. So here it is. It's the actual geometry that we had in Cinema 4D, but in Fusion. I will get rid of nodes that represents walls, because I don't want them in this scene. So my idea was to bring some fog into the scene, and I want that fog to follow the ship. That's why I needed that 3D scene and our ship movement in Fusion. So I'll bring in the fog footage that I bought from Lens Distortions. Here it is. I will now click Ctrl Space, type Image Plane 3D, or you can just start typing plane, and connect our fog to this image plane. I'll click 1, and now you see that this fog footage is in space. But it's not connected to our scene yet. Just drag that image plane to merge 3D node. Now it is connected to the scene, but it's not in place. You can drag it in space, but instead I'll go to ship node, press that coordinates icon, and just copy XYZ coordinates. Now it's in place, but it's super tiny. So I will scale it up. Quick tip, if you reach the limit of a slider, just start typing in the value you need. Here we go. Now it's too big. I'll scale it down. Now I want to connect this fog to the rest of the scene. Here it is, but it's overlaying. So in merge node, I will drag that burn in slider all the way to the right. See, now that fog is following our camera movement. So I think I will color grade this fog a little bit to make it subtle. So using this 3D technique, you can do pretty cool stuff and make things look more and more natural. I will speed up all my next steps, guys, and I already told you everything about how it's done, and it's up to you how to use this. Finally, to render your scene, control space, type in saver, specify where you want this sequence to be saved, and connect the whole scene to that node, and press render. Of course it might be better, but you know, for the purposes of this tutorial, it's good. I enjoyed it, hope you enjoyed it too. I think there was enough useful info for you to use in your work. Thanks for watching, subscribe to my channel, and I see you guys in upcoming vlogs.